There are moments that come quietly, without warning. On an ordinary morning, you wake up and realize life looks the same, but something inside you has broken. You no longer belong to what once made you feel safe. The conversations that used to comfort you now feel exhausting. The places that once made you feel alive now echo with emptiness. That's when your soul has crossed a point of no return. Carl Jung's psychology calls it the awakening of the self, the moment you stop living for the world and begin living for the truth within yourself. From that moment on, everything still looks the same, but nothing is old anymore. You start seeing with new eyes, hearing with new ears, and living with a heart that has just been born. It's not an easy journey, but it's the truest one. Because, as Carl Jung's psychology once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Part 1. When the old world becomes strange. A morning like any other. No thunder, no omen. Just you, sitting quietly, watching the light slip through the curtains. Everything looks the same. But inside you, something has melted. The room is the same. The work is the same. The familiar faces still smile as they did yesterday. But somehow you no longer see yourself in any of it. You look around and everything feels like a faded memory of your own life. The voices, the stories, the meetings, the birthday wishes, all familiar and yet foreign. As if you're acting in a play your soul has already walked away from. No one notices. You still smile, still answer, still work, still walk the same road home. But an invisible distance grows between you and your own life. You no longer know what's real, and the silence inside starts to grow loud. Carl Jung called this phase the separation from the persona, the mask we wear too long just to be loved, to feel safe. Since childhood, we've learned to smile when we want to cry, to say "I'm fine" when we're falling apart. We trade authenticity for acceptance, our soul for peace. But no mask fits forever. One day you feel that old skin tightening. You're tired of small talk. Tired of pretending to be positive. Tired of pretending, period. It's not weakness. It's your soul growing too large to fit inside a lie. And so things begin to crack. Not outside, inside. The self you've carried for years begins to tremble. You no longer know who you are without your roles, what you want, what you believe in. That isn't a breakdown. It's a second birth. Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now you're beginning to see that darkness. You feel lonely. But it's a pure kind of loneliness, not because you've been left behind, but because you've stepped out of the herd. You begin to see everything that once made you feel safe now feels heavy. The relationships that once defined you now loosen. The roles that once protected you now feel like chains. No one hurt you. It's just that your soul can no longer fit inside the old box. You remember your old dreams, the things that once made you feel alive. They return quietly, as if asking, "Do you still remember me?" You feel confused, you feel afraid. And yet, within that fear, there is peace. A strange, quiet peace, as if you've touched something utterly true. At night, you can't sleep, not from worry, but because something inside you is awake. You hear every breath, the ticking clock, the wind against the window. And in that silence, a voice rises, not from outside, but from within. "I can't live the old way anymore." And that's enough. You know a chapter has closed. No bells. No audience. Just you, a soul quietly shedding its skin. The things you once called right begin to shake. The goals you chased now feel hollow. You start questioning the very values you built your life upon. And that's not failure, that's freedom beginning to stir. Carl Jung said, "Awakening always begins with dissolution." The soul cannot rise while the ego still rules. You are dissolving. But don't be afraid. Dissolution is not the end, it's the first step of rebirth. Look into that lost feeling. Don't fix it. Don't run from it. Because within that very lostness, your soul is redrawing its own map. No one can show you this path. It isn't in books and it has no formula. It can only be lived with radical honesty. One day, you'll look back at this moment and smile. You'll realize it wasn't when everything fell apart, it was when you began to find yourself. When the old world feels unfamiliar, do not fear. It isn't loss. It's your soul calling you home. Part 2. When the inner voice becomes louder than the world. After the old shell cracks, the first thing you hear is silence. A strange kind of silence, not because the world has stopped speaking, but because you've stopped listening to what is no longer true. In that empty space, a faint sound begins to rise. Not anyone else's voice, your own. The voice buried beneath years of living for others. It speaks slowly, softly, but every word falls heavy on the heart, like truth finally remembered. At first you think it's imagination, but then you realize it's your soul speaking. Jung called this moment the awakening of the deep unconscious, when the soul begins to send signals through nameless feelings, through dreams, through strange coincidences. You think of someone and they call. You dream of a symbol and the next day it appears. You walk down the street and feel as if the universe whispers, "I'm here." It's not illusion. It's synchronicity, the meeting point of the inner and outer worlds. The universe mirrors your soul. When the inside changes, everything around begins to move with it. You start realizing the advice, the molds, the standards of the world no longer fit who you are. You pause mid-conversation and realize you're agreeing with something your heart doesn't believe. You listen to the news, to social media, to opinions and judgments, and suddenly it all feels loud. Too loud, as if the noise of the world has drowned out your soul's breath. So you withdraw. Not out of weakness, but because you're learning to hear yourself again. Silence becomes a sanctuary. You sit alone, no music, no voices, no distractions. At first, it's uncomfortable. But slowly within that quiet, you begin to hear clearly. A voice, not commanding, not arguing, just knowing. A voice that knows when you're pretending, knows when you're betraying yourself, knows when you're pleasing someone without feeling. And you begin to realize every answer you've searched for outside has always lived within. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Now you understand. Because when you turn inward, you're no longer being dragged by life, you're steering it. The more you listen, the clearer you sense what aligns with your soul and what doesn't. No logic needed. No proof required. Just a quiet certainty. This feels right. Or, this no longer belongs to me. From there, your choices begin to shift. You no longer choose out of fear, but out of truth. You no longer stay out of duty, but out of love. You stop clinging to people because you understand what's truly yours will never need gripping. You say no more gently and yes more wholeheartedly. You start living less, but living truer. Fewer plans, fewer roles, less noise, and more presence. At first, it feels lonely. Those who once walked beside you no longer understand. You grow quieter in loud conversations. You smile, but your eyes carry a distance. Not because you've pulled away, but because you're vibrating on another frequency. Jung called this the descent into deeper consciousness, when a person stops living as the shadow of the crowd and begins to live as a soul with its own direction. You realize silence is no longer frightening. It's alive. It's where you hear the wind, the heartbeat, and even the drip of water in a quiet room. Every sound feels alive. Every moment becomes a small conversation between you and existence itself. That's when the outer world stops commanding and the inner world begins to speak. Now you no longer need to chase signs or seek fortune tellers or ask for advice, because you've realized you are the sign. Your soul becomes the compass. You navigate by feeling, not by maps. You choose by energy, not by calculation. No one may fully understand you, but you understand yourself more than ever. And that is the beginning of true freedom. Jung once said, "What you call fate is the manifestation of your own unconscious, trying to fulfill itself." When you begin to hear that call, life stops being a chain of random events. It becomes a sacred dialogue. Nothing is coincidence anymore. Everything carries a message, if you're quiet enough to listen. When the inner voice becomes louder than the world, you no longer need answers, because you are the answer. Part 3. When letting go is no longer loss. One day you realize you've stopped trying to hold on to everything. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally understand that what's meant to stay will stay on its own. Some people leave and you don't chase them. Some old dreams fade and you no longer wish to follow. Some passions that once set your heart on fire are now just echoes in the distance. There is no tragedy, no collapse, only a strange kind of peace. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the darkness you see now is the fear of letting go. The fear of losing control. The fear of being alone. The fear of emptiness. But if you look closely, you'll see that clinging is what truly hurts you. We once believed that holding on was love, that keeping things was safety. We tried to save relationships already decaying because we feared the emptiness afterward. We stayed in soulless jobs because we feared beginning again. We kept old habits because we feared the new might wound us. But little by little, the soul grows tired. And in that exhaustion, a small truth flickers to life. You cannot carry what no longer belongs to you. Letting go is not giving up. It's acknowledging that a cycle has completed. Like leaves falling when autumn comes. Like the tide pulling back to make room for a new wave. No one blames the leaf for falling. No one demands the wave stay still. In the same way, your life needs space to be reborn. What leaves you is simply what no longer matches your frequency. Jung called this moment the symbolic death of the ego, a necessary dissolution so the soul can expand. It hurts, yes, but it's the pain of being born again. You might cry without knowing why. Your chest feels empty, yet light. You feel lost, yet strangely at peace. That's your soul clearing space for the new. One afternoon, you open your closet and realize you own too much. Clothes you don't wear. Keepsakes that mean nothing now. You gather them to throw away, but hesitate, as if saying goodbye to pieces of your own past. Then you smile. Because you understand, everything once needed has already served its purpose. And in that moment, you feel a new breeze enter, not just into the room, but into your being. Letting go, after all, is not an action. It's a shift in perception. You no longer see leaving as failure, but as honesty. You no longer need to prove your strength. You only need to admit that you've changed. Someone might ask, how do you know it's time to let go? And the answer is always simple. When peace no longer lives in the holding on. The world calls it loss, but the soul calls it release. You begin to feel that when something leaves, it takes with it the parts of you that no longer serve. A relationship ends and carries away its lessons. A dream fades and makes space for a truer desire. An old habit disappears and gives birth to a new self. Letting go in the end is clearing space for light. You stop trying to fix everything. Stop blaming yourself. Stop fighting the current. You realize not everything broken needs repair. Some things are meant to walk with you only for a short while. And that is enough. Letting go doesn't make you weak. It makes you empty so that you can be filled again. Like a cup that can only be refilled once you pour some out. Like a forest that renews itself only when it allows the old leaves to fall. In that emptiness, you begin to hear your own footsteps again. And you realize you are still alive, still moving, just lighter. Carl Jung called this the reconciliation of light and shadow. You no longer fight yourself. You let things simply be. Sadness is allowed to be sad. Joy is allowed to be joy. Loss is accepted as it is. No more categories of good or bad, only right timing. You start to see that everything in life comes not for you to possess, but for you to experience and release. People, love, success, failure, all are forms of learning. Letting go is not abandoning life, it's staying with it with a lighter heart. You sit by the window watching the sunset. Light slowly withdraws from the room. And you understand, even the sun knows how to let go each day. It leaves without fearing the dark because it knows dawn will always return. When letting go is no longer loss, you have understood the meaning of freedom. Part 4. When time becomes sacred. After you've learned to let go, everything in life begins to slow down. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You stop chasing time. You stop treating every hour like a race. You begin to see that faster doesn't always mean more alive. There are mornings when you do nothing, just sit and watch the sunlight move across the floor. And in that quiet moment, you feel a peace that has no name. Carl Jung once said, "The time of the soul is not linear, it is circular." We've grown used to living by the clock. Morning, night, work, rest, success, failure. We call it order, but often it is a cage. We forget that the soul knows nothing of late or early. Everything that comes on time, only we are too impatient to notice. Now, after enough silence, time begins to reveal another face. No longer something to fight against, it becomes a companion. You begin to sense that every phase of life has its own rhythm, a season for planting, a season for rest, a time to move forward, and a time to be still. The tree doesn't bloom all year. The ocean doesn't roar without pause. And human beings, too, need stillness to be reborn. Once you feared wasting time. Now you fear something else, living without presence. You start realizing that 1 minute lived fully is worth more than years lived unconsciously. A single, wholehearted hug is holier than 100 promises. A simple meal, eaten with gratitude, can make an entire day complete. Time is no longer measured by calendars, but by how deeply you are alive. You stop saying, "I don't have time," because now you understand, time belongs to no one. It lives in how present you are. You walk slower, but see more. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You no longer rush to arrive anywhere because you realize every step is arrival. Jung described this as the expansion of temporal consciousness, when a person no longer lives bound by the straight line of past and future, but touches the eternal pulse of the present. Then the ordinary becomes sacred. A cup of morning tea, a long breath, the chirping of birds outside, sunlight resting on the table. Nothing grand, yet everything alive. You begin to see that sacredness isn't found in temples or monasteries, it's in how you see. One day you're stuck in traffic. It's hot, you're frustrated. Then suddenly, amid the chaos, you hear a child's laughter. That sound cuts through the noise, and for a moment, your heart softens. The world hasn't changed, but you have. This, Jung called a living symbol, those small, fleeting moments that awaken the deepest part of the soul. You start to understand that time is not the enemy stealing youth, but a patient teacher showing you how to live truthfully. Every wrinkle is not decay, but a mark of understanding. Every loss is not punishment, but a lesson in unconditional love. You stop counting days. You start feeling them. At this depth of awareness, time is no longer a flow, it is music. And you no longer chase the rhythm, you dance with it. No past to regret. No future to fear. Only the infinite present. You walk beneath the sunset and suddenly realize each ray of light, each breeze, each breath is meaningful if you are still enough to feel it. The peace you once searched for was never gone. It was simply waiting for you to slow down enough to meet it. And you understand, time doesn't pass by you. You flow within it, learning to love every heartbeat it offers. No more rush. No more fear. Only gratitude. Because every moment, short or long, is an opportunity for the soul to be fully here. When time becomes sacred, you stop counting the days. and begin living inside each moment. Part 5. When you begin to live as yourself. After all the cracks, the silence, and the letting go, something miraculous begins to happen. You become light. Not because the world has improved, but because something inside you has transformed. You no longer try to make people understand you. You no longer seek love by losing yourself. You stop wearing the masks of good, agreeable, or acceptable. You begin to live truthfully, and it feels as light as air. Carl Jung called this moment the integration of the self, when the light and the shadow no longer fight. When all the rejected parts of you are finally seen, accepted, and embraced. You no longer feel ashamed of your weakness. You no longer deny your anger, pain, or desire. You realize that every piece of you has meaning. None of it needs to be erased. It only needs to be loved honestly. You stop chasing a better version of yourself. You realize that what the world needs is not a perfect you, but a real you. You live like water. No need to prove, just to flow in the right direction. You do what warms your heart. You speak what you believe. You stay where your soul feels alive, and you leave where it doesn't, without guilt, without apology. You begin to choose differently, not from fear, but from clarity. Not from pressure, but from respect for your own spirit. You pause in the middle of a decision and ask, does this bring me peace? If the answer is no, you smile and walk away. That isn't selfishness. It's honesty with your nature. The outer world may still be loud. People may still judge, gossip, assume. But the strange thing is, you no longer react as before. You don't need to prove. You don't need to argue. You don't need to win, because you've learned that peace doesn't come from others. It comes from within. Someone asks, "What's changed?" And you simply smile. "Nothing, I just stopped pretending." You smile because you know. It's been a long road. From confusion to silence to surrender, and now to return. You've walked through the darkness and learned not to fear it anymore. Because now you know, the light was never gone, it was only hidden. You begin to live slowly. You notice the soul in small things, a simple meal, a sincere conversation, an afternoon breeze brushing the curtains. You realize that living as yourself isn't a grand act, it's honest presence in every moment. It's daring to say, "I don't know," when you truly don't. It's daring to say, "I'm tired," when your heart needs rest. It's daring to say, "I love you," without fearing pain. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And now you understand what that means. It's not a beautiful philosophy. It's a lived truth, to exist without betraying your soul. You no longer need validation. You no longer need to be understood. Because the deepest understanding can never be spoken. When you begin to live as yourself, you stop searching for purpose, because you become the purpose. Everything you do, everything you say, every breath you take, carries the frequency of your soul. Your presence becomes an invitation, a quiet reminder that others too can live truthfully. They don't have to be perfect, only honest. You become a still mirror, not trying to reflect anything, but somehow everyone who looks into you sees themselves. Not everyone will understand you, but the ones meant to will find you. They recognize the energy of truth. And then souls of the same frequency begin to meet, not by coincidence, but by resonance. One morning, you wake up. Nothing special, except you feel full. No need to add anything. No need to prove. No need to run. And you smile, because you finally understand peace is not a destination. It's the way you walk. From here on, life is no longer a checklist to complete, but a journey to be savored. No longer a stage for success, but a space to experience and express your soul. You haven't become someone new. You've simply remembered who you are. Everything that broke was only the shell that needed to fall away, so your truth could emerge. And now that truth is alive, breathing, present in every moment you exist. No more searching. No more pretending. Just living, When you begin to live as yourself, the world is no longer something to conquer, but a mirror reflecting your awakened soul. When you've walked far enough on this journey, a day will come when you look back and realize every loss, every loneliness, every heartbreak had a reason. Nothing ever happened to punish you. Everything happened to awaken you. Carl Jung's psychology once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And you have done that. You have brought light into your darkness. Now you no longer seek peace, you are peace. Life will still test you, but you are no longer afraid. Because your soul has crossed the point of no return. You are no longer a seeker of meaning. You have become meaning. And this is the final message of Carl Jung's psychology. The greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And if you've made it here, welcome home. Thank you for joining Carl Jung, wishing you peace and mastery over yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Carl Jung channel to stay updated with more meaningful philosophical life lessons about life. Thank you for watching. Always cherish life and enjoy every moment. See you in the next video.